mind sharing your CodeSandbox branch for me with me?
Oh yeah, it's called impact exploration. Um, yeah, if you just type impact dash exploration, you should be
Found
fine.
it.
Oh, there you are. Nice. Um, yes, where were we? Oh yeah. So yeah, we ended like the last stream together with a bug. And the reason we had a bug is because we have this like we're in the branch context. And by the way, did I not I started using this more explicit. I really like functions like branch context. Like I really like functions defined this way for some reason.
Like a user the keyword function, you mean?
Yes. Yeah, so it's not you're not assigning a function to a variable, you're just defining the function. I don't know why. Like it's not because of like what it enables, it's just that it's just nice. It's the same for functions, right? I prefer like export functions sorry, for components. I prefer doing this than doing some
Mhm.
component equals
But
this.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think arrow function has different behaviors.
Yeah.
Like depends on the context. I think in the if you are using a class, right?
Mm-hmm.
They auto bind the function.
Yes,
Is that correct?
exactly. Yeah, so you bind the context of the function to like the outer scope. I guess that's how you would put it, like technically.
Hmm.
Uh, so
But for me, it
if you do foo and you do this, then this is the object.
hmm.
But if I do, oh my god, what the hell's going on? If I do this, then this points to the outer scope, which is global, the
Ooh,
global scope in this case. Yeah, and but also
it's a
like,
bit weird
hmm?
because it's weird that the syntax defines how the your object behaves.
Yeah, yeah, I have
Yeah,
mixed
that's weird.
feelings about this. Like I'm in the camp of why adding when it's like when you design APIs in general, the arrow function is arguably syntactic sugar. So you're just
Hmm.
making some things easier to write out. It's not like you can't do it without arrow functions. There's nothing arrow functions uh, extends the language with, like a capability of the language. It's just syntactic sugar. And then um, I don't like that as a principle in API design, that you just add API because you want to express things with less syntax. I
Yeah,
like to
I
have
agree.
just a function, and then in some contexts maybe you have to write a little bit more code, but it's still there's one API surface. It's called function.
Hmm.
Anyways. uh, cool. Yeah. So we're in the branch context, and we're using this observe thing. And what we did last time is that I actually fixed it now, but last time we just called get suggest commit.
Hmm.
Uh, but in that get suggest commit, which is this one, I wonder why we call it commit message. It should be like get commit message. Like it's weird that we call it commit message. Um, we should even call it get suggested commit message. This is the old code. So inside the observe, we would basically run this code. And this code is both setting and getting the value. So if you think about that in an observing context, you're changing a signal while you're observing it at the same time. and that causes like a loop. And that's like, this is not about like the signal API that we're using here. This is generally with observability. If you're observing
Mhm.
something and you change the value when you observe it, by default you would get into a loop. It needs to be handled somehow. Because you can imagine like you're observing that you're setting the message and then you're setting the message at the same time. So it will just, okay, since you're looking at the message and you're setting the message, then we need to run the observe callback again because we just changed it and you're observing it. And then it does exactly the same thing. It's setting it and observing it, and then it evaluates, oh, you're observing this, it changed, and then it runs it again.
Yeah, it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like it's not like obvious. You don't really think about it. It's like when you go into the details of it, it like makes sense, but it's not obvious. And that's the thing about like observability, is that normally it just works and it just follows like a very simple mental model, but then you can get
Mhm.
into these very specific scenarios. Uh, while other solutions, they are like more complex. Like React itself with its reconciliation loop is more complex like to learn, but it's like there's no like magic happening under the hood, even though it's very
Mhm.
hard to understand sometimes. You can still get into these loops and everything, but yeah. But anyways, what this library does is that it throws an error if you're observing and setting in the same observer context.
Mhm. Mhm.
I guess it could, like, we could ignore the setter as well. So if you set something when you observe, it doesn't like notify again. But that seems like magic to me. It's like, I think it's something you're doing wrong. And in this case, we don't care about the value. We just want to set the value, and that's what we're doing. So
Mhm.
yeah. Anyways,
So is this something very specific to the impact implementation, or signals generally works like that?
yeah. So it's I'm not sure how the others. I think there's different ways to solve it, but it's just the concept of observing access to values, and then in the same context also changing the value that you're observing.
Mhm.
So it's like if I run like a callback. Oh, let's see. Oh my god, this music, it was a little bit intense for me. Oh, there we go. I need my lo-fi chill list. Okay, so if I'm in this function and I'm like accessing a signal value, observe. So
Mhm.
now whenever this signal value changes, it will run that callback again. That's like, that makes sense. But what if I'm in this observe thing? I'm also doing signal.value equals hello. So now in the callback, I'm accessing the value. So I'm observing it. And then in the same
Mhm.
function, I'm also setting it. Doesn't that mean that I should run the callback again because the value changed? And I'm interested in that value if I do this. So whenever
Mhm.
this value changes, I want to log it. And then for some reason, I change the value at the same time. That means it should run it again to log out the correct value. But then I'm changing the value again, and then it just goes in a
Mhm.
loop. Um,
If you don't, if you don't make, if you don't do like a conditional over the setting, probably you'll get a, like infinite loop or something,
yeah,
right?
like it's a technical risk. And you could have this, like, you could like observe a signal and set it in the same context, but as you say, you could have like an if statement, or in this case, I'm setting the same value, so it would only happen once. If I set hello again, it wouldn't trigger the signal because it has the same value. So it wouldn't technically go in a loop here, but it could, like if I had some plus date now or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A dynamic value.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. Yeah. But for now, it would, if I were to like change it here again, it would like explicitly state that this is happening here, and you should not like set and get a signal value in the same observer context kind of thing. So it's very easy to spot when it happens. But I don't think it's common. Like typically when you observe, you do something, some kind of side effect. Cool. Yeah, so that's that thing. And then I also made a change. I didn't like make a change to any API surface, but what I did is that I changed like impact to like bringing reactivity to React, because now the context and the signal is very much like you need to use both of them. But that wasn't really the intention of impact. The important thing about impact is the context, because that's the thing that fixes the issues we have in our code base with all the let's see, where are they? Features. So all of these features are really contexts. Like we even define them as such. We say create hook context. So it's basically the same API as our existing features. The only difference is that this function that we use to define the context in our current implementation, that is within React, and it's part of the reconciliation loop. We're using React primitives to define state, and we use the reducer and everything. And that's why we have all this use ref and all of this like super complicated, like these use effects, like super complicated stuff. So the context of impact just allows you to define the context the same way, but it's a reactive context. So it means the function only runs once, and you can define variables, but you have to use some reactive state primitive, because now it's not part of the reconciliation loop. So what that means is that with the context in and of itself, it doesn't have any reactive primitives. It's just replacing a React context with a reactive React context. And then you can choose, like you could use MobX if you wanted to use that instead. Or if someone comes up with other reactive primitives that are awesome, you just have this context that allows you to integrate it more easily with React. You don't have to choose to go global to take advantage of reactive primitives. You can use them as part of context. And then the signal is just a different package. So you can use signals without using a context. If you want to just do a global state thing, you can just use the signals globally and just use them in your components without using a context. The main problem is that impact, someone has it. God damn it. But it's empty. Like there's no packages, nothing in there. So I've asked NPM to give it to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they actually have a form, a specific form for asking for package names and scopes. So yeah, cross our fingers.
Did you ask the organizational impact, the scope?
Yeah, the scope, yeah.
This would be amazing.
Yeah, but it's like, if like the thing is, if this was registered like 5 years ago. Like I've seen npm, they're quite like uh, they typically give you what you ask for because it's kind of obvious that it's not being used for anything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I haven't asked for an org or a scope before, so we'll see.
I was
Anyways,
wondering if it is a kind of a situation where people just register
yeah,
these keywords and
yeah,
then try to sell for somebody else,
yeah,
like a domain, you know?
yeah,
It's
exactly.
kind
That's
of a
what it is.
business.
It is a domain. So yeah, we'll see. But okay, so I haven't been able to actually publish these packages yet. So if I can't get the org, I'll have to change the scope. But yeah. Cool. But now at least we have it's loading, blah, 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 connecting. And now it's working on, we don't have a loading indication for the Git status. Maybe we should add that so we see it a bit more clearly. So we have our sidebar. Yeah, and we have our Git panel. And that's just suspending the Git status. So maybe we could add that, like loading Git panel.
Christian, would you mind reloading your page? Because I think the collaborations feature is broke. I
No,
can't I can't follow you.
that sucks.
I will reload my
Oh,
page again.
new editor version available. This is the first time I've seen it. Nice.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, I haven't.
It worked pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. At least after spending so much time with it, it's nice to see it working. Okay, so we have the loading Git panel, but then we also had, within the Git panel, we had, yeah, getting commit message. Yeah, and that should still be there. So if we refresh, loading, preparing micro VM, loading Git panel, and then that's pretty awesome. Like the whole flow of getting from nothing to your authenticated state, to getting the branch, connecting to Pitcher, getting the Git status, and getting the commit message. And it's so like nicely expressed.
Yeah, I agree.
It's pretty
Yeah, the
awesome.
code seems pretty simple now.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is a very raw implementation, but
Yeah.
trying to put this in perspective, try to compare with the current code base we have, I think
Mm-hmm.
it it's easier to get it. It's easier to understand and try to abstract this to what you have now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. It's I never thought this like data fetching, like using components for data fetching, would be such a powerful concept, but it really is. And it also made me reflect. If we go back to like the impact context, just being the context, you can imagine that maybe you want to use MobX, like that's your favorite thing. But then you can still do data fetching using use query in your components. It's just that when you get the data, you give, like we're doing that now, we're giving that data to a context to expose it to the components. And then you can wrap that data in like a MobX observable to make it reactive. So when you do optimistic updates and stuff, everything just renders. And that's also something that I was happy about, like separating them, is that there's there's so many ways you can like explore different combinations of different tools, instead of like saying this is how you should do it.
Yeah, it seems very flexible.
Mhm. Um, yeah. Should we finish the flow? I guess it's just we want to do the. So we want to, like, now we're showing the Git panel immediately, but we really want to show the Git panel when you open it. And it's only when you open it that we want to go and grab a commit message. But we want the Git status to be updated in the background regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like an interesting factor that we have to consider in like to reflect our current implementation.
Yeah,
So
it seems a interesting challenge.
mhm.
Yeah, like right now the Git commit messages has this is constraint that we should only fetch when we indeed see it.
Mhm.
And I know that was very, very tricky to implement
Yeah,
first, first place.
yeah, that
So it's
was
a good one to start.
yeah, yeah, that was certainly tricky. And then and it's like it's the added complexity of doing that, but also when you click create PR, we also want to fetch a suggestion for the commit message, but we're
Yeah.
also like opening the Git panel, but we don't want to fetch the suggestion. Like we want to wait for the suggestion, but opening the Git panel, which triggers the suggestion, isn't what we're waiting for when we're creating the PR. When we're creating the PR, we are actually waiting for the suggestion. We just happen to open the commit
Mm-hmm.
sidebar as well, but both of them shouldn't trigger get commit message. Should only happen once. It's like it's super like when you go into the details of this, it's super super tricky. Um, uh, but before that trickiness, it's also the fact that you do not always open the commit sidebar by clicking the tab, like clicking this thing. You might also use a shortcut, or as I said, if you're on create PR, we also want to open it. So that means that we can't have that state of showing the Git panel as a local state of the component. It needs to be accessible by really anything in the editor.
Oh yeah, I got what you mean. Yeah, for
So,
example, in the sidebar we have this icon when it says there's something to commit, like there
mhm,
is a valuable Git status value,
mhm,
and yeah, it should be accessible for any part of the UI. Or for example, the create PR always also uses this value
mhm.
to indicate you have something to change to commit. So yeah, but
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong. This is very tied to the sidebar. Now it's tied to the Git panel, right? Or
Um,
isn't?
yeah, so that's the thing, like, um, so like consuming that state is tied to the Git panel, but changing the state, that's like anything can do that, like a shortcut, the, well, also consuming, no, sorry, not consuming. Yeah, so opening up the sidebar, that like changing the state of the sidebar, that needs to be like everywhere in the branch editor, so anything can choose what's going to be shown on the sidebar, but it's only the sidebar itself that's concerned with that state, like consuming that state to figure out what should I show.
Mm-hmm.
So since it needs to be possible to change the sidebar state from any part of the editor, um, we should probably put it in the branch context, because the branch context now represents, well, it depends, like you could also, this is the interesting thing about context, like if we put it in the branch context, that will be valid as long as you're on this specific branch. But if you change to a new branch, do we then still, so if you choose to show the Git panel on one branch and then you change to a different branch, do we still want to show the Git panel, or do we then want to reset like layout state. Um, I guess now in the editor we have a lot of persistence around this and endless
Mm-hmm.
discussions on how to persist layout. Um, but we can just implement it here for now. But it's interesting. You have to think about that. Like, how long should this state live? Should it live beyond
Yeah.
uh, the current branch context, or should it be like more global? Should we just call it sidebar panel, and then we basically just have two states for this. Like we have git, and let's just call it default. We'll start with default.
Mm-hmm.
Current sidebar panel, let's call it that, and then we'll return that.
Okay, maybe you already said that, but why not a local state inside sidebar?
Yeah, because then if we do that, you can like flip between like the git panel and not the git panel, but nothing else can do that. So, for example, when you click the create
Yeah.
PR button, which is like a parent sibling somewhere, it wouldn't have access to opening
Yeah.
the panel.
Ex-
And this is the thing. This is the exact reason why like my personal journey, like exploring global state stores and stuff, it's this exact thing. Like building up like these relatively complex applications, I always got into the problem where I implemented state locally in a component and then I needed it somewhere else. And I constantly refactored, and it was such a demotivator, because you're exploring and you're prototyping and figuring out how is my UI and my functionality going to work, and then you constantly have to refactor just to get access to the state where you need it. And that sucks. That sucks big time. So what did we call it? Current sidebar panel. So I guess we can, yeah, let's just call it content. And then we can switch on the current sidebar panel. Oh, sorry. So this would be like null, but it can also be.
Let me add 2 buttons here.
Oh, yeah. Oh my god, I just got a bit. Will this work? Oh, but that's awesome. Git, and then we'll say that. And I guess we want our content to be underneath. Oh, not null, content equals null, and then we break, and then we break. Why are you complaining? Oh, it's a constant. There we go. Oh my god, imagine that, Danila. We actually did collaboration.
It did work.
It did work. And look at that. Yeah, maybe you could try adding an on click on. Yeah, well, I can go in and I can create the method for toggling the panel, and then you can create the click for. I'll just call it like set current panel.
Oh, but I know that something is wrong.
Oh.
Like I was typing, and it continued follow you. So
Oh,
once I type anything, it should stop following you.
yeah, it should stop following. Oh, we had so many. We've had so many sidebar panel.
I'll take a
Yeah,
note here.
Yeah, and
in being
follow mode is
manipulated.
like one of the most complicated things as well, because it ties into like the interactions of the user, and then you have your own interactions where it should break out or not break out. And
Mm,
with our current approach, having all these different contexts with the complexity of like reconciliation and using dependency arrays to detect certain scenarios and stuff, it's like it's super super tricky to implement that kind of stuff. But here we would just make it part of the branch context or something. Sidebar panel. Let's see. So I want you to send me a sidebar panel, and then I'm going to say current sidebar panel equals panel. So you should be able to call set current panel now.
done.
Nice. And this is also what I like talking about contexts and like the this keyword and what it's bound to. What we're seeing here is also what I love about just using a function and not a class, is that you can confidently destructure the
Mm-hmm.
context because nothing points to this. Like everything points to something in the scope of the function here. So you're always free to just destructure and use any method and state directly, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Do, 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 do. That didn't work. Did we observe? No. Observer. I looked at Preact. Like I was exploring, like on the last stream, I completely diverged and I started implementing my own virtual DOM library.
Yeah, I
No,
saw that.
yeah, but like this idea that like every component has an observer context, that would be so nice. Like you would never be able to do that with React. You have to explicitly add that context. But
Mm-hmm.
Preact, for example, has that. You don't
Mm,
have to like, if you're using Preact signals, they will just work with the components. It automatically observes them, which is really nice. Oh yeah. Doop, doop. Okay, so what should happen now is that if we refresh, and since we load the git status, where's the git status? So when we load up the branch context, we immediately go and grab the status. So this is happening in the background now, right?
mm-hmm.
So when we change to the git panel now, we should already have the status, but we wanted to generate a commit message. I guess it's also generated the commit message because now it just reacts to the git status and then it generates it. But we don't want it to do that. We want when we click, then it starts generating the commit message.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing we should need to do now is that we should just need to check, are we on current sidebar panel? If that is the git panel, then we generate it. And what's nice
Only
about this,
this? It's only that? And then
yeah.
the stuff.
So if you think about this observer, like what it does is that it reacts to changes to the git status, but it also now observes the current sidebar panel.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter if the git status changes or the current sidebar changes. It will rerun this function and evaluate what it should do.
Got it. I I was about to suggest you how to implement this final part, but I thought, okay, maybe it's too simple. But yeah, it's just this.
Yeah, and sorry, I should
I
really start asking you to how would you approach this?
yeah.
Yeah, well, how would you approach it?
No,
Like,
exactly like this. But I was thinking, I was wondering, maybe it's too easy, like it's too simple. But
uh,
yeah, now you have everything the same scope,
mhm.
and we observing these values, so it makes sense. Like it's a simple check.
Yeah. Well, let's see if it works. Yeah, it did. But it says so much about like again like why did we put the current sidebar panel in like we didn't put it globally in the app, but we put it in the branch context. It's because we like it's tied to the git status as well, like that sidebar panel, like what it should do or use that
Mhm.
state for. It's yeah, I love finally I feel like I can talk about like why even build tools like this, like because it's so insanely complex, the stuff we're doing. And you can't
Yeah.
just say, yeah, you can use query for this. No, you can't use query to manage this kind of complexity. You need something lower level that gives you the flexibility you need. Anyways, uh, but now, okay, let's create PR button. I can't remember what it. Maybe we don't have to create the PR, but what we really want to
Mhm.
do is when we're in this state, um, yeah, and also now like when we move, oh, this is also interesting because now when we move back, it grabs the message again, which we don't really want because we already generated the message for the current git status. Um, Arguably, or at least for the sake of complexity, let's say that we should only do this the first time the git status has changed. Uh...
Sorry, I can see the problem.
Like when I move back here and I move back to the Git panel, it regenerates the commit message. But we
For the
already
same
generated a commit message for this Git status.
cut. So you are looking for kind of a cache,
Yeah,
something?
yeah, exactly. Mm, getting suggested message. So I have one thought on this. Is it's that what we're doing now is that we have this signal that represents the actual like fetching of the suggestion. We don't have a signal that actually just holds on to the last suggested
Hmm.
message. Um, so that's something we could do, is that we have a signal that represents the actual message that we have. And then when we go and grab a new message, we update that signal that has the actual message. And then when the file's length changes, we are going to reset that signal. Like we don't have a current message anymore.
Hmm.
So it's basically what you said. It's a cache, but yeah, but more detailed. Um, yeah, I think I would do that. Because what would happen then if you start changing? No, I don't think that would actually work. Oh, this is an interesting one. How would we do that?
I was thinking that now we are using the files length to say, okay,
Mm.
this is just a raw implementation, but ideally we shouldn't just look for the file length changes because you might, I don't think it's reliable. Really, we should really look for the file path and if
Yeah.
the file path are different than the previous values. Okay, this is just a,
No,
a
it's true.
basic implementation.
Yeah, and like every Git, like we don't have access to the actual Git diff here, but it has like a hash, the Git diff. So you could like use talking about caching. Like, what would you use as a key for that cache? You wouldn't use, as you say, the file length. That doesn't make
Hmm.
sense as a cache key. But you would use something like composing the paths together or the hash of the diff, for example.
Yeah,
That's yeah,
because you could make changes at the same file and generate different Git messages.
yeah,
So yeah, definitely the hash of the Git diff.
exactly. Um, and what's also interesting here that we could also use is that yeah, I agree. Like that would be the most explicit way to do it. What's also interesting here is that um, what we're really observing here is whenever the git status value changes, and the git status value only changes when there is an actual new git status.
Hmm.
So that's also like reliable in the sense that we actually have a new um, value here. So you could even cache the like the suggested commit based on which git status value do you have,
Hmm.
because it's a promise and the promise is new every time you have a new git status.
Yeah, and just trying to remember how you implemented this, and you had something like a stale message or something, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So once you get a new Git status promise value,
Yeah, you don't
you
get
can
it.
mark this message as stale.
Yeah, you mark it as stale, and then if you happen to be on the current sidebar panel, yeah, no, yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, that makes sense. So um so again, like we have the current suggested commit message, uh oh, which is like a signal, and then we can say that this is a suggested commit message. So like all these things could be handled with a bunch of Boolean flags and checks.
Hmm.
And this is the thing I often find where some developers state that you're over engineering it. And to some extent, are true. Like we can make this work faster by just thinking flags and checks. But when you rather think about like these states, like what's the actual state of things and how would you express those states and so on and so on, it gives a better final result. It takes longer, but it's a better implementation in the end, I want to argue.
Yeah, I agree. It's easier to maintain in the long term. When you look to a code with a lot of flags, boolean, we don't know the exactly meaning of this boolean.
Yeah,
And what about if you need a third value for this boolean? So we need to refactor your entire
yeah,
code base.
exactly. So what I want to do here, I want to suggest that we have something called a suggested commit message, which has the message, but it also states if that message is stale or if it's fresh. And
Hmm.
then we can either have a suggested commit message or it might not have it. So it could be undefined. So if we have it, we can check, is it like a stale message or is it a fresh message?
Mhm. I would argue that if a message is stale, so we don't need the message.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And maybe you could even have this initial state as stale because
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. Like, would we ever want to display the stale message? I guess what you could do is like, what if you move to the Git panel and we have a stale message, but we want to still show it in the input, but it's disabled while it's working on the new
Mhm.
message. That's an argument for having a message, even though it's stale. But I
Yeah,
don't think we.
maybe for the UX perspective makes sense,
Yeah,
like at least to show something is loading or whatever.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, let's try that. Yeah, that's my, because I don't disagree with you. It would be simpler if it was just stale, and then we could just initialize it as stale as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, okay, let's try this. So we have. Uh, did we have getting suggested? Oh, so this, yeah, this should be getting suggested, and then we have current suggested commit message. Let's just be super super explicit about this. Return, is that what I called it even? Yeah, it was. Okay, so every time, so let's remove this thing. Let's just keep that. So every time we get a new Git status, which is what we're observing here,
Mhm.
and we have a length, we want to say that now our commit message is it's stale. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, but this might happen like even the first. This is annoying. No, let's go with your version because there's really three states there. It's like you don't have anything. Like it can be stale without there being a message there. That's the tricky scenario. It's like, um, yeah, but okay, but let's be super explicit then.
Like a idle or something.
Yeah, idle. Like it, or you know what? Let's just, in this case, this makes sense. It can be stale, but we don't have a message from before, or it can be stale and we already have a message.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that this is the check we need to do anyways. So yeah, let's just. So current suggested commit message. We're going to say that it's stale, and we're going to use whatever message we already have there. So that will be, message will be, there might be a message there, might not be a message there. So that's the only thing we do here. So now we confidently know whenever the git status updates and there are actual files there, we'll flag it
Mhm.
as stale. And
Cool.
then, oh yeah.
Can I try to write the rest just
Oh,
to
sorry.
see if I
Yes.
got it?
Oh, it's so good that you stopped me because I get so enthusiastic. So
Okay. I guess you need to have another observer to observe this currently suggest commit message.
yeah.
And let me see if value is stale.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's weird. I see your cursor. It's like it's not on the or the on the actual thing where you are. That's...
And then I can get, but then we need the files.
Mm-hmm. But I think uh, those should really be part of the state. It should be part of the stale state.
I see. So files.
Yeah.
What is files?
It's just
It's
a string array.
yeah.
Because now we bind the actual files that we're going to send to the pitcher to the actual state, which is a good thing.
And then I need to observe this guy here, right? Maybe
Yeah,
another observer?
you could do that, though I think in this case you could also just like do a then on the suggest commit promise, and then inside
Mm-hmm.
the then you would just update the current suggested thingy. So you would still have the thing you just removed, because that was the signal that indicates that we are grabbing a suggestion. While when the suggestion is resolved, then we want to update like
Oh,
current suggested. Yeah.
okay, yeah. So this says, he's not happy.
Yeah, this is because we like when you wrote the then now, it returns a promise of void, and getting suggested message currently wants promise of a suggestion result. So we can, if you just return res there.
Gotcha.
Oh yeah.
And then we need to mark this as fresh.
Yes, but you need to replace the whole value.
Yeah. Oops. Oops. Message, which is response. Let's call this
Dot something.
message.
Yeah,
Okay,
message.
response.
It's a message dot commit. But you don't have
Okay.
to. You don't actually have to update the getting suggested message value, because it's kind of doing that already. Because you're like oh, I can select stuff. So like this line here, this is assigning the response from suggest commit to the getting suggested message, and that's what we're also doing here. We're just returning the response. So when this whole thing evaluates, it's put into the.
Okay, so we can remove this.
Yes,
now.
exactly.
And then the files continue being the same. Nope. Oh, it's possible and define it.
Oh yeah, you have to. Oh, this is TypeScript. If you, it's really annoying. What you can do here is if you rather put the stuff into a variable like this.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, suggested commit message. Oops. And then you use that as a way to evaluate, and you can say like, I think that should fix it. And then I do wonder if we need, yeah, exactly. Do we need the files when it's fresh? Yeah, I guess it's nice to have the reference, like what files were actually responsible for this fresh message.
Mhm. Yeah, it's okay. And yeah, then that's it. Could
Yeah.
we use, well, let's set it here. if I want to make this async await, is it possible?
Yeah, you can like call a function. So you can create an async function and then just call it. So as an alternative, like function update suggested commit message. And then what was it? Did it take yeah, it has like a stale. Oh, we didn't put that into its own. Let's do stale suggested commit message. Let's see. Let me just create two types out of this. Stale suggested commit message. And then let's have fresh suggested commit message. And then the union of this is either a stale suggested commit message or a fresh suggested commit message. And what we want to put into our update function is stale suggested commit message. And then you could do what you suggest is like update suggested commit message suggested. And then response await. Yeah, maybe we could even just do files here. Files. And then like so.
Yeah, I like it.
That's nice.
But
yeah.
Does the observer function support async? Like why I couldn't do the same thing right here?
So this is
it's like a use effect that I can use async await here.
Yes, it's really just because when this callback runs, we create like an observer context which covers this whole scope. But if you do async and then you do somewhere you do like await, now this observer context only works down to the await. That's the scope it covers. Because the await kind of creates a new scope, and there's no way to like hook into that and bind that to this observer thing. So it's a really good question, because this is like the limitation of observability, is that it needs to happen synchronously in the scope. It's really funny actually, because for example in MobX, if you have an async action, which is basically just a method, you can't do async await there either. You actually have to like separate out into different like you can't even have like you can't do anything asynchronous. That's the thing. Because the scope has to be wrapped in an action to like protect state changes and stuff. So that's the definition, like also tied to like the challenge of observability. Well, what's interesting, what I wanted to say is like in Overmind, for example, that we use for V1, that limitation isn't actually there. It still has its observability nature, but you can like create like async action, and then in Overmind you have like state, and if I'm thinking about this the correct way, yeah, no, that isn't the right example. Because in MobX, it's about like protecting state changes, while in Overmind, you kind of get this special like state argument to every action, and then it doesn't matter what you do inside it. So compared to MobX, you don't have to like artificially split up actions in Overmind, but that's not really
Mhm.
tied to observing access to state, because that's the problem here. If you're going to observe access to state, you need to know which scope do you want to observe access. And with an async function, you can have like an infinite number of scopes.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Cool. I like it.
But does it work? Oh, we haven't actually implemented in the Git panel. No. So we have getting suggested message. Then we have current suggested. So we would do getting. Yeah, and here we're basically using. Yeah, so maybe we should make this like more. What we want to use the getting suggested message for is to indicate that we're loading. So maybe we can just use like a style or something here. So opacity. So if we are getting, if we're currently getting a suggested message, we'll change the opacity.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, yeah, that's right. And then I was just thinking about the error, how we wanted to do that, but we can still do that. Like, I guess the arrow, we wouldn't actually show that as the contents of the input. Like, we're getting close to something that's actually usable. So we have to start thinking about actual user experience.
Mm-hmm.
But let's ignore the arrow for now. And then we would just put, I guess we'll just put the message there, or update no message or something. So here we could, like, we have this fallback message now where we just count the number of files in the Git status. Yeah. But let's just do no message now, because we have to stop the stream soon anyways. Let's see now. So now we're getting the Git status. Oh, no. Damn it. I had a feeling this would happen. It's because we are synchronously. Oh yeah, I have never implemented like observing effects before, and I think they have something to them that I'm not considering. Cause what we're doing here is that we are changing this to this. So we're doing the same thing. We're changing this value, and then immediately when that happens, it runs this observer. So you have like an observer in an observer, and then it observes that value. So, okay, this is interesting. So what I implemented in Impact for the error was that if you have any signal running in an observe that has both a getter and a setter, I say that you're fucked. Like I give an error. But it's not strictly true, because it has to do with order. Because if you set a value first and then you go and grab, and then you kind of observe the value, then it shouldn't matter. because then it will change the next time the value changes. Yeah, I have something I need to fix here in impact.
Yeah, because here we are only calling this function. We are only setting
Yeah.
conditionally. So it should run twice, right?
Yeah, and I'm also like curious if. Oh yeah, sorry. I was looking at. I actually meant this one. I was looking at the wrong thing.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So we have like this observed triggers, and then it sets the value. But yeah, as you said, like this has already run actually when we click the Git panel. So this isn't in play when we click the Git panel. It's only this one. Wait, how is that?
In this
Why did it
error,
happen when we click the Git panel? That's interesting.
Christian, in this error, are you able to point to the signal that is causing this error?
Yeah, that's one I'm looking at now. It is actually the first. So maybe the Git stated wasn't ready yet. And then I clicked it, and then I think I feel very confident that I haven't implemented this correctly, because this is tricky stuff. Even just allowing having like taking care of the scenario where you have an observer that sets something and that triggers synchronously a different observer. So you have an observe within an observe running. I haven't reflected on that at all, because you could argue that when you do a set within an observe, it shouldn't start notifying these signals until the observe is done. So you only have one observe running at any time. So you don't get that nested behavior. But yeah, I'm trying to reflect on what actually happened here. So I'm pretty sure we have. Oh, we already have it. Oh, interesting. I think. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Yeah, I think I see the issue. Like, yeah, we forgot to check. Though it still doesn't fix the issue. And sidebar panel. Current sidebar panel value. Like, we only wanted this to actually run when we click the sidebar panel.
Oh, right, because our initial state
Yeah. So
is there.
yeah, so what I think happened here is that oh yeah, yeah, because what happened now is that immediately when this branch context was loading, it went in here, it saw that it was stale, and it would immediately trigger this. Which I guess is fine. But where does it get the initial thing from? Oh, sorry. Sorry. I thought we always had one. We don't. So the first time when it initialized this context, nothing happened here. because we didn't have a suggested commit message.
Yeah, even when the current sidebar panel is not Git.
Yeah. So it ran this one, and then as we set this,
It calls the second observer.
yeah. So that would trigger this one, where we do have, yeah. I'm a little bit curious what happens.
But I don't think we needed this conditional here, right?
Oh, wait a minute. I think I see what it is. It's this one. So this one is like it triggers the error. Like it's not necessarily, it could be that the error is implemented wrong. But what happens here is that this one is observing both current suggested commit message and the value of current suggested commit message. So it's setting and getting it. So when it first initializes this stuff, it triggers this observer, and this observer changes the current suggested commit message, which triggers this observer again, which changes this value, which triggers this observer again, which triggers this observer again. But I think this is the issue with the observer, because now we create an observe context here when this runs, but immediately here it doesn't actually finish this observe context. It, when it gets here, it immediately starts this callback, and I wonder if what happens to the observing context. Yeah.
If you assign this value to a variable outside the conditional, like this, is this make sense? Does it make sense?
Yeah, though it still accesses the value. So just the fact that you have this piece of code within this function is all it needs to. It's interesting because in Preact, you have something called peak on signals. So you wouldn't say value, you would say peak. And what that does is that it allows access to the value without observing it. So I wonder if this is really just one of the big headaches of using observability. It's like you have all these like dependencies happening in these different scopes, and then you have to evaluate, like just like the mental overhead of use effect is the dependency array, and like the number of scopes you have at any time in a component. For observability, this is the same like type of headache. It's like but it's, yeah, it's almost like I just wonder what the solution for this is. Like, what's the best experience? Has it to do with the order of you accessing a value and setting a value? Or is it, if you're setting a value, we should never observe accessing the value? So basically you can safely change signals within an observed context. Oh, it's interesting. It's really interesting. Oh.
And what would happen if I put this message outside the observer? This message would be stale.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Though I do wonder. what was I thinking? I think I saw a presentation from what's his name? Michel, the guy who made Mobex. I think I saw a presentation on this once. How to deal with like dependencies in when you have this observing pattern. It might also be a very simple solution to this. It's just that I haven't understood how to implement it. So it's like one approach is whenever you're setting a signal, when you observe something, you invalidate any access to the same signal. So conceptually, it means if you're setting a signal when you observe something, you don't want to observe the signal itself that you're setting. And I think that makes sense. Like, why would you? It was the example we had earlier. It's like, why would you want to? If I have signal value equals foo, why would you also want to observe when that signal changes? You just set it. It doesn't make sense that you also want to observe it. And what's also interesting is that logically, everything made sense to us here.
Yeah.
But it was an implementation detail that made it go wrong. So that's also what I'm thinking here. Like, so imagine in Impact, where I'm currently tracking for each observe, what getters and setters are being performed within this scope. So that I can see, I know now that's what the arrow is based on. If a signal is being set and get at the same time within the same scope, then I throw the error. But what would be possible to do is to rather say, if the same signal has a get and a set, just remove the get. Don't observe the get. And then this would work. Like technically, that's what I would do. But conceptually, this would just work. But it's based on the assumption that whenever you set a signal in observe, you don't observe the signal itself. I guess that's the better way to put it. You can't observe a signal that you're changing the value of in observe.
And do you have control of this ever?
Yeah, I can show it. If you have a few more minutes, I can show you.
Sure.
I can show it to you. And that might be how like Mobex and Preact does it. I wonder if they have some documentation on it. But it might be how they do it. They just say that when you observe a signal and you're changing the value of it, you lose the observability. Because that, by its very definition, causes an infinite loop. Yeah, so this is where this is the observer context. This is like the object that's being created when you create like the observe callback. This is the object that's being created, and then this picks up whenever a signal is being set or being accessed. So this is where I'm doing the throwing of the arrow now. So whenever a signal sees that something is trying to get the value out of it, it registers that signal to the current observer context. That, hey, in this signal, someone's trying to get my value. And then I do the same for a signal. If something is trying to set the value of the signal, it does the same. It talks to the current observer context. Hey, someone is trying to set a value here. And then the observer context keeps track of, here it just keeps track of signals, really. So it doesn't matter if you Yeah, so it doesn't matter if something tries to get the value out of a signal or tries to set the value of a signal. It will just throw an error because it happens. It happens twice. Oh, sorry. No, I do. Sorry, I do point to specific getters and setters. Yeah. So if you already register that something is setting the value of a signal and then tries to get the value out of that signal, I just throw an error. But what we can do here instead is, so the fix I would do is that I would not throw any error. I would actually not even have this stuff. And we don't need to register. Oh, wait. Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm not. Oh, did I? Yeah, this should just be called signals. Signals, sorry. I don't keep track of the setters. I will just make sure. No, I have to keep track of the setters, sorry. So we are registering the getters as normal. That's fine. And I wonder, we shouldn't do that here. We should do this down here. So when we are done with yeah, this dot getters. I'll explain it when I just have to think. So we're registering getters, we're registering setters. But what we're making sure of here is that, let's put this back. So instead of throwing an error, we're just going to return. So if you've happened to set this signal and then access it as a, to like, yeah, I'm trying to use the right term here, getter. I'm just calling it getter. You're trying to get the value, but you've already set the value. Then we don't allow you to, we don't register any observability on getting the value.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are setting the value and you already have registered observability of getting the value, then we want to remove that. So then we can say distance getters delete signal. So that means if you first look at the value of a signal and then after that you try to set the value, we'll just remove the signal from the getter. So it just means you're not allowed to observe it. And if it happens in the other order, maybe you'll try to set the value first, then it will just add it as a setter. And then maybe after that, you'll try to get the value. Then it will see that you already set it and it won't even add it. And when the observer context is done, it will go through the getters and register them to what's called the snapshot.
So
this is really for debugging. This is not really for actual functionality, but yeah.
So this should fix it, our problem.
Yeah. So what that means, like, I'm trying to find like one sentence that describes it. It's that when you are actively observing signals, that could be this observe function, or it could even be in a component. But like in a component, you would never set a value of state while you're rendering a component. That's why you don't see it in components, because A component function execution is just accessing data, it's not changing data. Um, but it's true for both. So whenever you have an observing context, if you change the value of a signal, you won't observe that signal.
Cool.
Yeah. The problem now is that I already merged the new stuff. I have to. I hope npm gets back to me so I can publish it. Because now it's all, yeah, it's two different packages. I guess I could use like a temporary name if we need to. Yeah. But this is really interesting. I never thought about, like, I never had to like actually think about this. And the point is that you shouldn't have to think about it. As we talked about, like, it was logical what we were doing. Like, yes, we want to set the signal and we want to use some of the existing value of that signal to produce its new value. Like, that makes sense to do that. But like with the tracking happening under the hood, that caused the issue. Yeah.
I was reading the signal code base, and it's kind of lean, you know. I
Yeah.
thought it would be very complicated, and but yeah, it's kind of interesting how it works.
Yeah. And if I remove the promise implementation, it's like it's just a few lines of code. Like that's the beauty of this. Is like it's so simple how it works under the hood.
So yeah, I was wondering if React will eventually implement this as a primitive. I think they started this conversation, but I
mm-hmm.
don't know if they really will implement it.
Yeah. I think they, what I would love to see, like talking about like how could React get native support for observability is that they would have a reactive context. That would be well, the challenge there is like the primitives of React contradicts observability, so you would have to have new primitives just for that observability.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like um it can be confusing. So you would have like use state, but that's like the normal implementation. Then you would have maybe use signal. Uh, but maybe, yeah, of course, React can do a lot more. Maybe they could just make it work out of the box.
Yep.
But I don't think it's enough for React to just make state reactive. Just the fact that like contexts, for example, if a parent component of a context reconciles the context provider and you happen to expose an object as the context value, that will like create a new object reference, and then everything consuming that context will reconcile, unless you use a memo around it. But then you have like the dependency array and everything. But yeah, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Amazing.
It's yeah. I'll hopefully this will just be part of the new package, or I can make a hack so we can continue. But this was very interesting. This is like deep, low level stuff on how to
Mm-hmm.
solve things.
Yeah, like it's interesting now that we are trying to implement a few features for real, kind of for real, and
Mm.
then it's so important to catch these limitations
Yeah, exactly.
now, as sooner or later. So when we try to use this for real in our application, this all kind of errors is already solved.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. But yeah, let's we went a bit over time, but I think it was worth it.
Totally.
And then we'll just talk next week, and I'll keep you posted on the publishing of the package, and then we'll see where we're at next week.
All right.
Awesome. Talk to you later, Danilo.
Talk to you. Bye.
Bye bye.